What's up, everybody? We are back. Ben Rasa, Matt Gajewski, Odd Chopper, and certainly college football. We're here to talk about everything week 2. We're going to go through all the marquee games, recap a little of week 1, and give you our favorite bets of the week. We're doing the full deep dive here on this beautiful Wednesday morning. Sir, I was just talking to you before the show got started. I said this looks a lot different than week 1. There are not as many 50-point spreads. There are some. And there's some serious big games on the schedule. Non-con is now in full swing.
For sure. I feel like last week we just had a couple of those big games highlighted by LSU, Florida State. Yes. Will take my L there. LSU did not find a way to get it done. But Duke, Clemson, that ended up being a bit of a letdown as far as the actual the play on the field. But overall, it was still a fun week. I mean, as we get non-con, people are just excited for football being back. And that's certainly the case with me, even if it's an FCS team versus a really good team or something like that. But yeah, we're lucky this week. There's awesome games all around.
There really is. Yeah. At Florida State, cool game. I just wish they would have knelt at the end. I had the under in that game and I could not get there. Some good, some bad. Week 1, looking backwards, certainly a couple swings and misses. North Texas, not great, but Texas State, my boys, are obviously an elite program. Never in a million years did I think Colorado was gonna win. And I also was disturbed, maybe you don't find this as disturbing, that it seemed like some teams really were running it up. Oregon scored 81 points, which I can't remember the last time a team did that. Oklahoma won 73-0. Seems like some of these teams' offenses have no chill early in the season.
What it seems like to me is their backups are better than the starters for some of those FCS teams, because like a lot of guys didn't play for Oregon. They had like 6 or 7 starters just sit out of the game. So, I mean, you recruit 4 and 5 stars, freshmen, those guys are better than the FCS opponents you're facing. And the same thing goes for Oklahoma. So that doesn't really concern me. The real disappointment for me was Wisconsin letting Buffalo move the ball, not being able to, I mean, Mordecai looked bad in some spots, not being able to move the ball downfield, dropping like a giant bomb touchdown. That was atrocious to see. So that was the biggest one for me. But overall, it was a pretty good week. Like Houston got there. Miami got there. A lot of the teams facing the MAC schools got there. We were on Colorado. They got there. No issues with, the Duke play got there. So it was a good week overall for me. Better than week 0. So I'm hoping we can parlay this success into week 2.
That's right. Yeah, we're climbing up little by little. I watched UTEP play Incarnate Word. They won. So everything.
Out of all the games, why did you watch that?
Because I had to see. Was it really that bad? And it was actually pretty bad against the Incarnate Word as well, because they play Northwestern this week.
I can't believe out of all the games you decided to put that one on.
I watched that from start to finish. I watched the entire UTEP Incarnate Word game. And
dude, there were like 75 games on.
It's okay. I had to, there's priorities. I needed to know. And I honestly don't know. UTEP has got serious issues. We're not really here to talk about UTEP, but let's talk about some games. We're going to talk about all the marquee games, but there is one game earlier in the week that I think is worth talking about. I'm going to bring it up right on the screen now. Let's get to it. And I'm talking about Illinois and Kansas. Kansas sleptwalk through. They played a FCS school. I don't remember who it was, but they won pretty much going away. A little sluggish to start. Illinois had Toledo. 3-point spread here. 56.5 again. Shop these lines. Jayhawks, Illini, pass. What are you doing to get the card started for Friday?
I'm going to take Kansas, getting their signal caller, Jalen Daniels, back. By all indications, he could have played in that first game, but he's been dealing with back tightness all throughout training camp, so it didn't really make a ton of sense to get him out there. And they had a capable backup anyway in Jason Bean. So why not use Jason Bean? They do lose Luke Grimm. He's questionable here. That would be a loss for them. Maybe their best receiver. They do have Arnold and Skinner, of course. It's pretty deep at the receiving core. But Illinois, they played Toledo pretty close, and that wasn't something I like to see. Toledo actually moved the ball on them. They averaged 4.4 yards per carry, 6.2 yards per pass. And if you go back and look at Illinois this offseason, they lost those 4 defensive backs to the NFL, like good defensive back losses. They now have 2 defensive backs projected to be out here. Tyler Strain's in concussion protocol. Matthew Bailey's already out. That doesn't bode well against an explosive Kansas offense that's going to spread you 3 wide, use Daniels, use his mobility, not to mention their rushing attack, which looked awesome here too. Kansas O-line looked great. They only allowed 1 quarterback pressure. And I was surprised. Illinois' run defense didn't hold up as well as I thought it was going to. Thought this was going to be the strength of the program. And of course, we don't want to overreact to week one, but they allowed 8 quarterback pressures on 32 dropbacks to Toledo. They got lucky and bailed out that Altmaier's really mobile himself, rushed for 69 yards. But man, that surprised me. I was not expecting Illinois to be as bad in the trenches as they were in week one. So hopefully they can get that corrected. I don't think they'll show it here, and I'll be back in Kansas. I think -3 is completely fine.
I agree. Looks like it's going to tick to 3.5 again. Oddchopper.com. I'll actually be bringing up Oddchopper throughout the show just so you guys can see the different spreads throughout the industry. I want this at 3. 170 is a little rich. I saw -150 yesterday, and I'd be fine with that if you want to go different. I'm not going to bet a total. If I did, I'd actually lean over here. I think that Kansas can really push this tempo, and I think they're going to have a lot of success and force Illinois to play at a faster pace.
Yeah, Illinois was 47th in seconds per pace in week one, which was surprising. That's faster than they've been historically. And Kansas is going to play with a decent pace. They suck on defense, and their offense is explosive. So even if they don't play the fastest, that kind of does lend itself towards the over on these totals.
1 game up, 1 game down. Again, certainly bigger games than that, and starts right now. So Notre Dame and NC State is where we go next. Let's see. Yeah, look at this. I'll bring it up right on oddchopper.com so you can see the different spreads at the different books here. 7.5 to 8.5 is out there. Again, this is a competitive game. Notre Dame has not been tested. They played Navy. They played Tennessee State. NC State, UConn, we can play the permutation game, but the floor is yours. How good is Notre Dame, and will they be tested here?
They'll definitely be tested more than their previous games, but I have a lot of questions about NC State. Still had questions about them heading into the year. They basically change offenses entirely, moved to Robert Anae and Brennan Armstrong. And for as good as Brennan Armstrong was in 2021, he had a horrific year last year. And a lot of that came down to the offensive line being atrocious at Virginia. But I don't think he played as well as people thought he was going to in week one. And I think the offensive line is probably going to be an issue here again, especially against Notre Dame. This team allowed 7 pressures on 37 dropbacks against UConn. The defensive line from Notre Dame is significantly better than that. He was pressured on 38% of his dropbacks. That was the biggest issue with him at Virginia's, him under pressure, getting scared in the pocket and bailing out and running. He did a ton of that against UConn, and it actually amounted to 19 carries, 96 yards on the ground. But Notre Dame is a better defense than this. They're just not going to let him escape the pocket and run all over the field. I have issues. They have terrible receivers. You don't even have Rosner on the depth chart, the Rice transfer. You're basically relying on redshirt freshman Casey Conception. I don't know. This is an issue. Porter Rooks, like these guys are not good receivers, and they're going to be facing a strong Notre Dame defense, which, again, is yet to be tested. But I think we can go back and look at their defensive depth chart from the preseason and think this is pretty good. You also have Raheem Ashford. He got stretchered off for NC State last game. Dawson Jamarillo's injured for this team. Notre Dame's going to run the ball right down this NC State defense's throat, who doesn't have Durden anymore. He's off in the NFL. I think Notre Dame covers this spread. I took it -7. I don't really have a lot of issues with the current number here, but I'm not buying this NC State team. And it just comes down to this wasn't a team I was buying in the preseason. They didn't show me anything in week one that really indicated they'd improved a ton. And they played UConn. So not showing out against a team like UConn doesn't really give me a lot of confidence. I'll back the Irish here.
I'm with you. I have not bet this yet, but I don't really. This is more assured of NC State. I don't know how good Notre Dame is, but I don't really believe in NC State. I don't think being at home is going to do much of anything. 51-point total. Estime and co should have a big day on the ground, and I trust Hartman. I just trust Notre Dame to kind of do what they do, and I think that'll be enough against NC State. I'm just not a believer in this Wolfpack squad. I like Armstrong too. I just don't think that this is the ideal spot. So I would lay the points even north of 7. And you could wait. Again, maybe it ticks down to 7. I just brought up Oddchopper. Keep an eye on that. But man,
I would wait. There's other people in the industry that are on NC State for some reason.
Okay. See? Yeah. Again, we have plenty of time. And if it goes to 8, 8.5, which it is at some spots, I don't think it's not going to hit 10. So I wouldn't worry. I would maybe wait and keep an eye on it as we get towards Saturday. what can you say about Dion, man? I mean, credit where credit is due. Yeah, incredible. Gets it done. I saw that they said this is like now the most bet game ever. Colorado opened as dog, not even on the look ahead line. They were dogs, and now it's swung up to 3. Again, I'll show the whole odds in just a second. What a weird situation, because Nebraska did what they always do, which is gave a game away, but now they get the long week. What are you doing here? Fascinating game to break down.
I can't remember if we talked about Colorado on Betting You or if it was one of the VODs, but this was a team I know we were buying going all the way back to our Pac-12 preview show. And I mean, buying is kind of a loose term here because their win total was so low, but you looked at their roster and you're like 4 and 5 stars everywhere. Good quarterback playing Shedeur Sanders. Now, I didn't think he was going to pass for 500 yards, but like a quality starter, I was worried about their depth from a season-long perspective. But if he plays the whole year, no issues. Good running backs, and we saw their freshmen ball out. Great receivers. I didn't think Hunter was going to play over 100 snaps, but I thought he would mix in on offense where if he were to play, this team is better than what people were projecting. Defense didn't really show a lot here. They gave up 7.1 yards per carry. They're basically portaling their way through defense. But all this to say, I don't think people were appropriately accounting for all the additions Colorado made and focusing entirely on the losses, all of whom were awful players. Now you get them -3, -3.5 against Nebraska. I don't think this is enough. I know this is a complete chalk play here, but I'm going to be backing Colorado again until people appropriately account for what this team actually has on the field. The only issue here is Miles Slusher is out of this game. He's a nickel for them. And I mean, they did not play well on defense in week 1. They just basically shot their way out to a victory. But I don't think Nebraska is really equipped to throw on you anyway. Jeff Sims had an awful showing against Minnesota, a Minnesota defense that you and I were not buying. They basically lost all of their premier players, especially in that secondary. And you look at Sims, man, the guy threw a bunch of interceptions, which was his problem at Georgia Tech. I thought he was going to overcome this in just a better offense, but 3 turnover-worthy plays per Pro Football Focus, no big-time throws. Offensive line was slightly better, but they still allowed him to be pressured on 37.5% of his dropbacks, 5 quarterback pressures on 24. 5 of them came from their left tackle, Turner Kokorin. I don't know how to say his name, so apologize to Mr. Turner. But all this to say, the Nebraska O-line still a concern. Jeff Sims still a major concern. They lost Isaiah Garcia Castaneda, a starting receiver, to a torn ACL. The only thing I can really say is their defense played decent, but how much are we really looking into this? Minnesota has a horrible offense. So I don't know. I think the talent gap is still pretty wide here. Colorado still an offense that has elite skill position players. They do have offensive line questions, defensive line questions. But with Sanders, with Edwards at running back, those receivers, Hunter, Horn, Weaver, they're going to play fast. They ran 85 plays in week 1. They're going to play at the speed of light, and Nebraska's not equipped to play that game. So I'll lay the points.
You can see you can find a 2.5 still out there. Obviously,
that's unbelievable.
Colorado's taking crazy money.
But the line's not moving.
Yeah, I wanted to back Nebraska in this spot, and now I don't know what to do. When Colorado was a dog, I put in our Discord, I think you should just take it blindly and then figure out if you want to buy back, because I was basically positive that this was going to move through 0 just because of all the public situation. You were definitely higher on Colorado than me. They're an enigma. I don't know what to make of them. I've said that several times. There's so many unquantifiable variables, things that I don't think are a huge deal, but they did just play in like the 130-degree heat and ran a million plays, and now off that. But talent-wise, I mean, Hunter, you mentioned him, Horn, Sanders. These guys are players that Nebraska would kill to have. So I don't know what I'm going to do here. Do you have the last thing, do you have an issue with the over? I mean, that kind of seems obvious. I know Nebraska doesn't play at that level, but Colorado's defense looked rough, and I don't think that they're going to improve much, if at all.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an issue for them all year, especially with Slusher out here. Yeah. Gave up 7.1 yards per carry, 6.6 yards per pass attempt. TCU actually averaged more yards per play than Colorado. So that's a problem, especially moving forward. But ultimately, Nebraska doesn't exactly have the offense, I feel, that's equipped to take advantage of this moving forward. They're not explosive on offense. They have offensive line problems. Their receivers are getting hurt. Sims is a walking turnover. In a shootout scenario, I favor the team with the better offense.
Yeah. And again, they're talking about home field that's going to be absolutely rocking.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it seems like we're overreacting to Colorado, but go back and watch the Pac-12 preview video. You and I were higher on them than the market, certainly to begin
definitely. No doubt about that. And the Pac-12 had a damn good showing all around, and we'll see if they can keep it going here with a I'm so glad we get to talk about this game for reasons that are going to be obvious in a second. Utah and Baylor. No, I don't want to talk about Utah. Good for them. It just proves that Florida's got serious issues. Baylor. Texas State comes to town from San Marcos and shows them what an incarnate word coaching staff can do. They lost a quarterback. Where are we at on this really interesting non-conference game between Baylor and Utah?
I'm staying away from it. Too many injuries on both sides. Rising allegedly is practicing in full, so you probably see him at this point. I don't know. They're not going to give you any information outside of that. I'm surprised we have that much information, honestly, but Chapin's gone. I don't know what they really have in Sawyer Robertson yet. He is a 4-star former Mississippi State transfer, but if he couldn't beat out Chapin, what does that really say about him? This offense has major concerns. They lost like all their offensive line heading into the season. Their defense is completely rebuilt. They only had one starter returning in the secondary. They're kind of good up front, which is decent against like a Utah team that really wants to ground and pound you. But if you get Rising back, I mean, then they'll be able to throw. So that's an issue. And Utah looked decent against Florida, I think. You know, Florida gave up the bomb on like the initial, I don't know, what really early in that game, and then held them in check decently beyond that. But Rising is such a big difference to the spread. If he plays, even if he's not mobile, I think maybe there's room for Utah to take money here, and maybe you get an edge, but I'm just not betting on injury luck in this spot with either team.
I have no interest in a side either. The total is sitting pretty reasonably, I think, at a low number in this spot. I believe, where is it? 47.5 range. I might look to the under, but this is just not a great game. Baylor off, like you mentioned, QB issues, mysteries abound for Utah. I'll see what the market does, but right now, 7.5 everywhere. I don't think there's really much to say. It's going to be a pass for me. And again, this is why I'm bringing this up. I hope you guys like this change. Let me know, by the way, in the comments. We're all about that. We want to make the show the best possible, but I think it's kind of cool to see the spreads across multiple books here at OddsShopper. And I do want to mention one of the books, which is Caesar Sportsbooks, because if you're not over there, first off, you're missing an opportunity to shop and possibly get the best number. You're also missing out on what they have going on right now, which is for new users. Sign up, link below, bet 50, get 250. What does that mean? You sign up and you bet $50. Win, lose, or draw, they're going to give you $250 in bonus bets. Each week, you get a $50 bonus bet 5 straight weeks. So 50, 50, 50, 50, 50, easy enough. $250 in bonus bets right at the start of NFL, right with college football in full swing. It's a great opportunity. And again, it's not for doing anything different. It's just for getting on Caesar Sportsbook, a book that I believe you should be on. I use it, one of the many books that I'm on, because I really like to shop the numbers and make sure I can get the best number possible. Got to be 21 plus. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. But shout out to Caesars for doing that. All right, let's keep it going. We got next up on the docket another big time game. And unlike the last game, I actually like these teams. And I'm talking about Miami and Texas A&M. We were on Miami. Miami rolled through Miami of Ohio. Texas A&M, I believe, played New Mexico. I'm almost certain. I couldn't tell you the score, but they did win the game. 52-10. That seems good. That was probably about where the number was. Talk to me about this game. Again, really intense spot. I believe it's down at the U, but what do you make of these two squads?
It is down at the U. They'll look for the home field advantage here. I wanted to bet this game earlier in the week when you had Miami like +6, +5.5, but they took money really fast. And a lot of that comes down to, I'm not sure either team is significantly better than their opponents in this spot, especially with Miami being at home. But it's not a number I love. It's in a dead zone. If I play this, it'll be late in the week, likely on the Miami side. I did think Texas A&M's offense looked better under Petrino. They played much faster, certainly. And I think they got their playmakers the ball, while Wegman looked pretty good. One big-time throw, no turnover-worthy plays. The big issue I do have with this Texas A&M offense still is their offensive line. He was pressured on 44% of his dropbacks. The offensive line allowed 8 quarterback pressures, 33 total dropbacks. That's going to be an issue against Miami. That's definitely going to be an issue against them in the SEC. And Wegman, I mean, he's like, he can move around back there, but we're not talking about Frank Harris or somebody evading pressure. So that offensive line, I do believe, is going to be a problem for them in the future. We'll see if Miami can exploit it. I personally think the Miami pass rush is decent here. But overall, A&M still should be able to score some points. They've got great receivers. Their defense looked better, but again, this was against New Mexico. This defense was outside the top 100 in every single major category last year. Top total defense, pass rush, coverage, run D. This defense was awful, and they are playing some better guys. Like, they've got some freshmen starting, some transfers. We'll see if that makes a big difference. But my question, even at the beginning of the season, was how high can this Texas A&M defense jump year over year? And that's still a question for me. I'm not sure. New Mexico is not going to give you the answer, but Miami certainly will. On the other side, I don't think Miami showed a lot against Miami, Ohio. Shannon Dawson came right out in the press conference after the game and said, quote, "We didn't do a lot of things that were even on the sheet last week," which I think makes a ton of sense with this game on deck. The only real injuries for Miami are the tight ends, Elijah Arroyo, Jaleel Skinner. I don't think that makes a huge difference. Miami was still awesome, even with their vanilla playbook, 6.9 yards per carry, 7.9 yards per attempt. Van Dyke did throw a pick. That's not great, but for the most part, outside of that, he looked great. Offensive line held up. He was only pressured on 19.3% of dropbacks. Those both came from the freshman, Francisco Malgoa, who's a 5-star. He should be much better. They looked awesome in the run game. Fletcher was solid there. Receivers are pretty good. Jacoby George and Restrepo played well. Their defense, I think, is going to be fine here. They have a couple transfers coming in, but those are premier guys. Malgoa himself, Francis Malgoa, the brother of Francisco, they're all there. And the D is going to start 3 transfers overall. But I think these rosters are more comparable than people might think. And I have a little more optimism with Miami as far as like untapped potential goes. What did they not show in week 1? That's where I would play it, but I haven't played it yet.
4.5 is out there at several books. It's Miami or pass for me. I'm pretty high on both of these teams. I think that Texas A&M is actually a really good dark horse candidate to do major noise in the SEC because I think the range of outcomes is gigantic. But I also think that they might just lose straight up right here. So it's that type of opportunity. We just don't know. I feel more confident in what I know about Miami than what I know about A&M. We'll see. Not that either team had to show a ton, but at home, getting some points. I thought they addressed some major positions. I've always believed in I'm a big Van Dyke fan. I would take the points with Miami. I haven't bet it yet. I'm not running to the window, but at 4.5 at -110 over at BetMGM, I'm fine with that. I think that can be on my card. This is already on the card. That's Iowa and Iowa State. Another game that I'm ashamed to watch. I didn't watch it all the way through, but I did watch a little Northern Iowa State just to see how bad Iowa State would look. They actually didn't look bad at all, but Northern Iowa is Northern Iowa. This is actual Iowa. What do we do here? This is always a crazy game. It seems like it's a 1-point game no matter what. I think that Iowa has the advantages. Do you see that in this spot?
I do think they have the advantages. The only issue I have is McNamara's hurt. He's going to play, but their coaching staff came right out and said they don't have the full playbook open. He can't run. They can't do sneaks. They can't do boots. So he's basically just limited to pocket passing. And the offense still was pretty damn bad out there. I mean, they barely used Caleb Brown, their Ohio State transfer. They were running that same stupid 2 tight end look. Eric All looked pretty good. Luke Lachey had a decent game too, but it's just not explosive. You either dink and dunk your way to like a score or you punt. I mean, Iowa still punted 7 times, and Utah State is a very bad team. So there are concerns here, certainly. But again, I don't want to just overreact to this awful showing that Iowa had in week 1, a game they only had a 65% post-game win expectancy against Utah State. the Ferenc bro should have been fired immediately, or I guess father and son should have been fired immediately for that.
Correct.
Cooper Lega and Utah State are not good. With that said, Iowa still has a great defense. They graded out very well against Utah State there. I don't think they're going to have any issues moving forward with that defense. They rotated a ton last year, so even their replacements are going to be solid. Their offensive line played really well too, and we thought this might be the case. They returned 4 starters from last year, a group that was very young. McNamara was only pressured on 17.5% of his dropbacks. Very, very good offensive line showing against Utah State. They also did a great job run blocking. So I think at the very worst, McNamara is banged up. You can fall back on that. Iowa State's still a mess. Only averaged 5.6 yards per play against Northern Iowa. That's a major concern. They played 2 quarterbacks. They're rotating a ton of guys on defense. I mean, they do have the gambling scandal hanging over their head, and they lost multiple starters from that. But you watch this game, on their first 3 drives, they used 3 different linebackers at one position. So, I mean, I don't think they've got their player personnel figured out. I don't think they can throw the ball. The offensive line, I think, will be a strength, but how much of a difference does that make against a really strong Iowa front? This total's really low. So, I mean, it's through a key number of 4 is a lot worse than 3, but I still think Iowa -4 is the play. I took it myself already.
I'm with you. Iowa's got serious issues. There's no doubt, but Iowa State has a whole different level of issues in my mind. I know that Iowa's defense is going to be sound. I don't know if anything is sound with Iowa State. I also think there's a very real chance that this game is 17-3, and that's fine. I don't know if Iowa State can score. Honestly, it's that type of game. Their offense, you mentioned, Northern Iowa, they're lucky that they did get an inferior opponent to try to work some stuff out, but I'm not sure if they really did. This is a big step up. Iowa or pass for me, but I was on the card, so it's not really a pass. I just straight bet them.
Same.
Yeah,
I know I framed it like Iowa's a bunch of concerns, and they do, but I think they're going to show up more against Wisconsin, I don't know, Illinois, other Big Ten teams, not the worst team in the Big 12.
Iowa State is not going to expose much of anything, so
I hope we're right.
I hope we're right too. There's just so many fascinating games next weekend, and Tulane, who's a really good team, gets another shot to make some noise against Ole Miss. 7-point spread, 65-point total. Talk to me about these teams. Again, we saw Ole Miss just absolutely mutilate Mercer. That doesn't really do anything. Tulane played a good team. Do not let that fool you. South Alabama knows what they're doing. I didn't catch the game, but I did see the score. So what do you make of them in this spot?
Tulane's a team I think we need to buy on in conference play. I was willing to sell them just based on how many departures they had. And they're not a team that hits the portal really hard, especially on defense. They basically fell back entirely on their depth, but man, did their depth play pretty well. They had an awesome showing against South Alabama. They forced Carter Bradley into 4 turnover-worthy plays. He had 0 big-time throws. They pressured the hell out of him, and they ultimately generated 5 turnovers. That's a little noisy. Turnovers, they're not the stickiest stat week to week, but all that to say their defense was creating a lot of havoc, creating a lot of pressure. Now we'll see if they can do it against Ole Miss. I personally don't think they'll be able to. This is a massive step up in competition from South Alabama to Ole Miss. And as good as Tulane looked in week 1, I love this Ole Miss team coming into the year. They played Mercer, so it's a tough evaluation. Anytime you have a team like this playing an FCS school, I basically look to see, all right, did they do what we expected them to do? And if the answer is yes, then I'm not changing anything. I'm going to continue to back them moving forward. And that was the case. You had Dart, looked awesome. Trey Harris played well. They didn't even have Zachary Franklin or Caden Priest scoring. I don't think they'll have either here, but they do have good depth. Trigg is still there at tight end. Harris is there at receiver. You still have Watkins at receiver as well. It's going to be a good receiving core regardless whether or not Franklin plays. Offensive line was awesome. They only allowed 2 pressures in the whole game. That's going to be a strength, not just for pass protecting for Sanders and Dart, but for Judkins running the ball, who looked awesome in the very small sample too. And then I think this Ole Miss defense is really improved. They've got a ton of guys, deep guys here too, and they were able to break in some of their young guys like Suntarine Perkins, that 5-star freshman they have. He played extremely well. It's against Mercer, but it's still positive to see highly recruited players that Ole Miss gets getting a couple snaps and playing well right away, because the talent profile for a guy like Perkins is just better than the players they were using last year. I bet Ole Miss -6. Don't really have a lot of issues with the current number. It's beyond 7 where I get a little bit hesitant with this number. What do you think?
So, yeah, I mean, I thought that South Alabama had a very real shot to beat Tulane, and they did. You mentioned the turnovers, a little noisy, but Ole Miss, I wanted to find 6.5. I don't think that that's going to happen. I think that's gone and not coming back. Flat 7 -110. Ole Miss are a pass for me. I mean, you mentioned the offensive line. Dart looked. I mean, it's Mercer, I know, but like they just looked like they knew what they were doing. And in the years past, and we'll see what Tulane can do. But like in years past, Ole Miss, it's like, yeah, they're going to score, with Corral, they're going to score 45 points, but can they stop anybody? I don't think the defense is a liability at all. I mean, do you see them? I think the defense might be a strength.
I think it's a strength for sure.
Yeah.
I forgot. There's one big thing. I can't believe I forgot to say this. I think Pratt's banged up.
That's big if true.
He wasn't participating in the media available portion of practice. And that's not the end all be all. He could have just been in the training room getting extra work before they start like teamwork and stuff, which seems to be what was happening. But a less than 100% Pratt is a positive for Ole Miss. They also don't have Corey Platt Jr., their linebacker. He's not going to play in this game for Tulane. So there's a couple injuries in the Tulane side that I just forgot to mention. Not sure how healthy Pratt is.
Keep an eye on that. Again, if it's a major concern, then I definitely like Ole Miss. The spread will move, but if it doesn't cross 10, I would take them in any number in that range. One team that I did like was selling short Louisiana Tech, and they played SMU on Saturday, and SMU looked good. I already mentioned that Oklahoma just went biblical on Arkansas State, 73-0, 0 chill. Now they get a real test. 15.5, it's come down a little bit. 68.5 point total. Preston Stone and co, can they keep up with Oklahoma? How do you play this one?
I think they can. I really wanted an SMU plus 17. I missed it. I currently have 16.5. I think that's fine. I wouldn't be surprised if SMU takes more money. This is a really good AAC team. You have Preston Stone, the former 4-star quarterback. He hasn't played a ton, but early indications suggest there's not really a big drop-off from Mordecai to him. He had 4 big-time throws, only 1 turnover-worthy play. Offensive line did a great job keeping him upright, and he can run anyway. Pressured at only 17% of his dropbacks. That was awesome. The O-line only allowed 4 pressures on 40 dropbacks. They also did an amazing job run blocking. It was against Louisiana Tech, so take this with a grain of salt. But ultimately, the offense, we were expecting it to be explosive heading into the year, and it was just that. Then they'll be facing Oklahoma, who wasn't really tested, at all. I thought Arkansas State would put up at least a score, but they couldn't even do that. Oklahoma does have a couple injuries. Drake Stoops, he did not play in the second half. His arm was in a sling. Doesn't seem great, but they're pretty deep at receiver. Desan McCullough, their premier transfer from Indiana at linebacker, left in the first quarter. He has a high ankle sprain. That's not positive for an explosive SMU offense on the other side. That's going to definitely test them, and they can't really lose any guys on that defense. The defense for Oklahoma is kind of rebuilt in some spots. I don't love the fact that they're losing McCullough. On the SMU side, for their defense, they are just using transfers at almost every single position. They were 121st in total defense last year, so I don't know that that's really a bad idea. But ultimately, I think SMU can score with Oklahoma. I don't think they win the game outright or anything crazy. But 3 scores almost here, 16.5. That's a number I do like. I wish I had the 17, but ultimately saw this potentially moving SMU's direction, so wanted to get the best number possible rather than wait on a number that's probably not coming back.
Yeah, it's almost all 15.5. There is
holy smokes, it's at 15.5 now. Okay.
Yeah, but there is
no key numbers.
17 out there apparently on Bet Rivers, which kind of shows what they're doing. I'm
Please
not really
take that number.
Yeah, if you can find it again, it just speaks to why you want to search around and why you want to be on. See, all these books. Again, the links in the description. And if you're going to be on the books, you might as well get the promos with them. Yeah, Oklahoma is definitely going to put up a bunch of points. I think SMU can match them score for score at times. You mentioned some of the injuries. My boy, Sawchuk, your guy, he didn't play.
He's supposed to be back, though.
I saw that they said he could have played, and they just didn't. They had like 8 running backs that all scored, so that's not a concern.
One issue I do have with SMU is their kicker. He missed 2 field goals in week 1, so if I would just hope you're not
don't kick
down
ever.
17 points or something. SMU is the ball late, they're gonna kick, and then he misses it. So that's something to at least mention. Close
Never
games,
kick.
Kickers, college kickers, man, yeah.
Yeah, you see the Clemson kicker?
I saw him get a bunch of kicks blocked, and then I fell asleep at halftime.
Yeah, I mean they fumbled at the 1-yard line like 5 times, but yeah, kicking. Listen, I'll say this: if SMU is kicking a bunch of field goals, it's not going to end well. You got to put up 7 against Oklahoma because Oklahoma is going to score. SMU can match them. You shouldn't be kicking field goals, make or miss. That's definitely not a recipe for success. Moving on, another team, like I said this at the beginning of the pod, and yes, it is true with the transfer portal. You want to keep your 4 stars happy. You want to get guys some reps, but 81 points, they almost killed the Duck. You had to do like 700 push-ups, they said, cumulative, because of the way they score. Much tougher test here. It's a 6.5 point spread, and it's a fascinating spot because Texas Tech, they were up 2 scores before I could blink, and then I found out that they lost in Laramie to Wyoming, which is always a weird place to play. What do you do here? Can Oregon simply just blow past them, or is Texas Tech now on the buyback?
I kind of think Texas Tech's on the buyback. We didn't see anything from Oregon, which was predictable, I think. They didn't even play a bunch of their guys. So right away, I think there is a potential buy low for Texas Tech, just based on the fact you saw 2 kind of differing offenses, or I guess different outcomes play out in this game. Texas Tech had an 82.4% post-game win expectancy. They definitely should have won that game. Really surprising that they didn't, but it was pretty noisy overall. Texas Tech missed 3 field goals. So, I mean, in close games, that's going to be a problem for them, and it was definitely a problem here. You need to get your special teams right. Otherwise, you will lose games like this. So really tough for all the Texas Tech backers. They were probably the hottest Big 12 team preseason in terms of win total and conference futures. But ultimately, there's still some other concerns for Texas Tech. Shug had a bad game. He had 4 turnover-worthy plays, 2 big-time throws. His offensive line kept him upright, too. He was only pressured on 20% of his dropbacks, so you just can't be having that. But ultimately, having that good offensive line should be a positive for him in the future, as long as he can iron out these kinks. I would honestly just rather they start Baron Morton. I think he's better than Shug. But anyway, Texas Tech's defense played pretty well. It's hard to evaluate them because they played a quarterback who can't throw in Andrew Peasley. I thought their weakness coming into the game was going to be their front 7, which they held up decently well against a Wyoming team that only runs. I still think this defense is going to be a problem. I think Oregon scores at will. The reason I still think Texas Tech is fine at 7 specifically, I still see a 7 out there. Hopefully Odd Chopper shows it and you can find it. They're going to score themselves. This team plays fast. They run that Zach Kittley air raid, the former Western Kentucky offense. They have good receivers, Jaron Bradley, Miles Price, guys that can definitely get open and score for you. All you really need is Shug to not turn the ball over. It's honestly a big ask at this point. But Oregon has definitely has concerns on defense themselves. They lose a decent amount in their secondary. Their first-round corner, Christian Gonzalez. And again, we didn't see anything against Portland State. PFF does like their schedule-adjusted rankings for all these statistics. Against Portland State, they still come in 73rd in coverage. It's a 1-game sample, but I mean, Portland State at least did something in that game to warrant the Oregon being basically a middling secondary overall. So I think Texas Tech can hang. I do not like this under 7, though. I think the number is very key here.
Yeah, we got to wait on it. There's a lot of minus 115s out there. I think 7 will reappear. So again, keep an eye on
7 on my screen. I don't know how.
See, well, you got, again,
I'm in Wisconsin. I can't bet on normal books.
Tough scenes. Do you have any interest in the over?
It's high.
It is high.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I'm looking more towards the over than you. I just think that Oregon secondary in particular can be exposed. I know Texas Tech's not the most equipped team to do that, and I think Oregon's going to score. I really do. They play so fast, so many weapons. We'll keep an eye on that. We'll keep an eye on 7. Actually, it is a perfect time. I do want to say real quick for you guys who are maybe unfamiliar with what we're showing on the screen, this is just one part of Odd Chopper. The devs did a great job. This is just the odd screen, one of the more basic things. But if you're looking to take it to the next level, if you believe in market-based approach, like having tools do the work for you, I'll just give you a little sneak peek at the shop tool. You really should consider joining Odd Chopper. Sign on up. The link is below. Again, you pull up these screens and it shows you ratings. It populates in real time and it shows you what books are hanging inefficient lines based off the true odds in our algorithm. And it's a really cool thing. They've got a bankroll tracker, all sorts of tools, all sorts of sites, every sport imaginable. Really, really cool stuff. So if you're interested in that, the link is below. Sign up, and there is a good deal right now. I'll just go full screen for 1 second so you can see it. It says full screen right on the, look at that tab. 70% off that first month. So if you're saying, I don't even know what this is, test it out for a month. It's like $1 a day. And if it's not for you, it's not for you. But really cool stuff. I believe in it. I use Odd Chopper each and every day to make my bets. Definitely part of my process. We got a bunch more games to go because, again, this is a stacked week 2. I don't really like this next game. I'm not going to lie. UCF, we saw them beat up on poor Kent State. Boise State, you predicted, I believe, that they got issues, and Washington showed that they got issues. What do you make of this squad here with UCF going to the blue turf?
Yeah, their coach basically said ahead of the season we're going to have issues because he came right out and told the public he doesn't want Taylen Green to run, and Taylen Green had 1 rush attempt. I'll tell you this, Boise State OC, the best trait that Taylen Green has is his mobility, and you're trying to take that out of the offense. I don't know what Boise's trying to do. Unless that gets figured out, they're going to be an offensive issue all season long. They have bad receivers. Latrell Caples is hurt. Their receivers played horribly in this game. You basically have Stephon Cobbs who had 2 drops themselves. He did not play well. And I like this UCF team. They were my sleeper in the preseason ahead of conference play. You know, if there was going to be a long shot out of this conference, I thought it was them. They didn't play a good team in week 1. So, you know, it was kind of the situation. Did they do what they were supposed to do? Yeah, they certainly did. Average almost 9 yards per play, elite rushing attack. We knew they were going to have that. Rhys Plumlee definitely has a big part of that, but Harvey looked great. The only issue I had with Plumlee is he had 3 turnover-worthy plays of 1 big-time throw. He ended up with just 1 interception that easily, 2 interceptions, I believe. Anyway, that could have been worse for Plumlee, but ultimately, offensive line did a great job. Only 21% pressure rates. Run blocking was pretty good. Nothing really that we weren't expecting from UCF, which is what I like here. In Boise, good or bad, and I think it's bad, we got exactly what we were expecting to after their dumb OC decided he wasn't going to use the strength of the actual pass game. But anyway, the Boise State offensive line had some pretty bad issues. They allowed 10 quarterback pressures. The receivers combined for 6 drops. Boise basically lost their entire secondary this offseason, and we just saw them get absolutely baptized by fire against Washington. UCF still has really good receivers. I know people that play like DFS and stuff were pissed that Javon Baker didn't do anything in the first game. He didn't need to do anything. They still have Javon Baker. He's an Alabama transfer. Kobe Hudson, an Auburn transfer. Trent Whitmore, a Florida transfer. And Townsend played really well. He was actually maybe their best receiver in that first game. That's going to be a huge issue for a Boise secondary that's completely rebuilt. They've got a couple injuries on defense. We'll see here, man. The big concern here is UCF doesn't exactly travel well at times. A lot of times they don't leave the state of Florida. At least last year, I think they left it 4 times and their win-loss record wasn't great. I would point to Plumlee's health in some of those games. But I think Boise's biggest advantage is just being at home. But ultimately, I think this team is much worse than UCF.
Well, I agree with that, no doubt. It's definitely a little freaky for UCF to travel to Idaho. That's just weird. Like, there's no doubt. I'll point to, again, I'm not saying that's why Florida lost, but Florida went out to Utah, and it was kind of a weird spot like that. The difference here, though, I think it's a little weird because Penix is going to do things that UCF cannot do. He torched that secondary, but UCF, with their little bubble screens, and Plumlee will be running all over the place, I think they can expose Boise State's defense kind of in different ways. Obviously, Washington, what they do is kind of unique, and I don't think it'll be the same. But the speed, just the advantages they have on the outside, 3.5. I know this feels a little trappy, but I'm buying on UCF. I really think that they're just significantly better than Boise to the point where a home field is not going to make that big of a difference.
Yeah, it's third key number. I missed -3, unfortunately. That was a bit. Man, living in an illegal state, you just can't get all these numbers. But 3.5 is one I still took myself.
Yeah, I live in New York. I have no excuse. I'm just an idiot and I missed it. But you know what? It's like I just missed it. I don't know what I was doing because I looked and I like this spot. But I still think we're going to be just fine here. We get to, it's got to be the marquee game. Texas and Alabama. We saw it last year. Bryce Young heroics. So let's, I didn't say this at the beginning. Texas was a team that hurt me a little. They played awful against Rice. They still almost covered. You mentioned field goals. They took, I think, 4 or 5 field goals in that game, a couple turnover on downs, and it didn't matter. Their goal was to not get Ewers killed. They nearly failed at that, but they, in fact, didn't get him killed. They did make it to Alabama. 7.5, sevens are bouncing around, 54.5 point total. What do you see? Can they go into Tuscaloosa and do it?
I don't have a lot of interest in a side of this game. I don't think either team showed a lot, and that was, I think, the concern last week.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't really ask Ewers to do anything. 0 big-time throws, 0 turnover-worthy plays, and they have great receivers. They can do this in most games. They basically just, all right, let's get the ball to Sanders and Worthy and A.D. Mitchell and Whittington and just let them do what they do. We're playing Rice. We don't need to do anything. Like, Baxter fell on the ball, and he got the wind knocked out of him. He didn't play the rest of the game. They're just like, all right, screw it. We're playing Rice. We don't need to show anything. The offensive line, I think, looked okay. Ewers getting himself killed at times, I think, is his own fault because the offensive line only allowed an 18.5% pressure rate. I think Ewers is still a problem for this offense. His downfield passing is still an issue. His pocket awareness is a major issue. He never takes off and runs, and he has decent mobility. The offensive line stood up well here. It's just Ewers has to let go of the ball at some point. So I honestly put a lot of this on him. He's kind of a bozo in the pocket sometimes. Defense was pretty good. I mean, you played Rice, but they did exactly what we expected them to do. So anytime that happens, it's just, all right, I'm going to fall back on my preseason priors. They did what we thought they were going to do. Bama, it's hard to say because they played Middle Tennessee State, but I thought Milroe looked pretty good. He had 3 big-time throws, 0 turnover-worthy plays, showed that sick mobility. He was pressured on 27.5% of his dropbacks. That could be an issue moving forward. But, they started Caden Proctor. He's a 5-star freshman. You'd expect him to get better as he gets more reps. I think they need to play more Roydell Williams and Haynes at running back. Jason McClellan looked terrible. Their offensive line did a decent job run blocking. McClellan just sucks, so they need to get him out of there. The biggest concern with Alabama, I think, is their injuries. Malachi Moore and Jalen Key are hurt. I don't know if either of them play. They were listed day to day. They both left that game, didn't return. That I do think is an issue against Texas, especially when you're facing Worthy, Mitchell, Whittington, Nair if he plays a lot. I don't know. He's just a backup. Sanders, whatnot. They've got receivers that are going to stretch you out and take advantage of some injuries you have in your secondary. Not to mention they were starting a freshman safety in Downs. I think he's awesome, but he is a freshman back there. Against some veteran receivers, I do think that's an issue, which leads me to the over. Like, I do think Texas can score, especially on a banged-up Bama secondary. And I think Jalen Milroe showed enough here where we could maybe back him. Like, I like Bama's receivers. Bond had a great game in week 1. You still have Burton. You had a couple of tight ends. I do think this goes over the total. I bet it at 55. It went up to 56, which I was like, all right, going to get some great closing line value. And then it went back down to 54.5. So it's bouncing all over the place. Like, Texas is going to play fast. They ran 77 plays. Bama probably a little more measured, but I think there's enough issues on the Bama defense and enough positives for Milroe that you could look at the over here.
Yeah, again, you mentioned it's Middle Tennessee State, but Milroe, he brings a different look, the dual threat ability. Ewers, I'm telling you, I watched because I had a position on that game. Maybe it is him because he took some shots in that game.
Stinks, man.
Like, he was taking shots and he was throwing a ton of deep balls. The thing I like about the over, I wouldn't be stunned. I mean, I don't know like how you really quantify this. A lot of it's luck. Ewers could have a couple of dynamite 60-yard bombs and he could throw a pick 6. He's that type of player. Like, he takes chances. He's putting it up. And I think that really helps to further this pace. If I had to take a shot, I really believe in this Texas team. So I would take the 7.5 before I laid the points, but I'm with you on the over. I'm fine with that. I think Alabama will score, even if they control tempo. I think that Texas can keep pace, and efficient-wise, I think both offenses, you could argue, have advantages over both defenses. So I'm fine with that in a big-time game. It's not a elimination game, but certainly, you get that one. It really does help. Any chance? I mean, we don't need to play that game. I was just gonna say, do you think Ewers is in danger? If say he plays terrible, how much is the heat gonna rise for Arch?
Probably, I don't even know if it's Arch. They got
No, the other guy, what's his name? Murphy, I think.
Yeah, they have two good backups. I don't know, man. Ewers hasn't shown anything. I can't believe he is getting first round NFL draft type.
Big game for him and big game for Texas because they've got the tools to compete and they need to compete. You mentioned Wisconsin earlier in the show, kind of a sleepwalk. Ches Malusi broke a 90-yard run. And then Braylon Allen got his later in the game. But now they got to go out to Pullman to take on Washington State, who played Colorado State. I didn't see much of that game. 6-point spread, 58.5-point total, give or take. What are you doing here?
I like the over in this game.
Okay.
I was a huge bozo. You're talking about you being an idiot early in the week. I saw this sitting at 55 on Sunday, and I was like, I like the over in this game. I'm going to wait. There were some inefficiencies from these offenses, especially on the Wisconsin side. Wake up the next morning, it's at 58, and I was like, all right, just take it now. It's probably still going to go up. There's a couple reasons why, but man, I'm just beating myself up for not getting that first initial number. To get into the offenses, you've got two air raid schemes. They both are going to play fast, even if Wisconsin doesn't embrace full pass air raid. They're kind of running that power mesh between the two offense. They were still 40th in seconds per play. Washington State was 38th in seconds per play. Both these offenses are going to play fast. And I think you can exploit weaknesses on the defense for both sides. Washington State played Colorado State. I don't think that's a great team overall. They did look pretty decent on defense, Washington State, that is. But at the end of the day, I fall back on the priors. This team lost both their defensive tackles. They lost 2 linebackers. They lost 2 DBs. Some of those guys were transfers. One of their linebackers is at Miami now, Malagoa. That's a problem. You lose 4 of your starting front 7, and now you're facing Braylon Allen and this awesome Wisconsin offensive line that played pretty well. They didn't have Jake Renfro. Apparently, he's still not ready to go, but that still leaves 6 guys back that have starting experience for Wisconsin that are paving the way for Braylon and Ches Malusi, who gives them an awesome 1-2 punch. And honestly, Wisconsin probably should have covered this spread. Mordecai, for as bad as he was in some spots, I mean, he did have 2 turnover-worthy plays. Both of them resulted in interceptions. They were awful. He also threw just a bomb down the field that was right in the receiver's hands. Boom, dropped, drive ends. That was going to be his score. So you could have had a cover here easily. Offensive line protected him well. I have faith those receivers will come back here and eventually be able to catch some of those long balls. And then the reason I like the over more than anything else is, you have Jordan Turner's out for the first half. He had a targeting call. They still can't get Michael Mack on the field. He's an Air Force transfer. Air Force is basically blocking his transfer, which is a lot of people upset, including Fickle. So, I mean, Wisconsin's defense still is ironing out some kinks. I think they'll be good down the road, but they lost really good guys like Benton's gone, Herbig's gone, some really good players. And then, Washington State spread you out, run 4 wide, Cam Ward's back. I think that can exploit a Wisconsin secondary that's undergoing some changes. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to is I think Wisconsin's going to be able to score, but can Washington State score enough to get this over the total? And I do think that is the case with Ward, the receivers, and their offense looking good. They were 9.3 yards per pass attempt against Colorado State. That's not saying a ton, but they did what they were supposed to do.
Definitely. Yeah, I believe in Ward. Again, I'll just say it 5 times a show. Incarnate Word, baby. Another guy who's come in and looked good. He's got obviously some experience now. 58.5. It is off the board right now, but I don't expect anything drastic. It just happens to be off the board. So keep an eye on that. We got a handful of games left, and then we'll bounce out of here. Again, if you have any questions, anything at all, JazzRaz DFS, Matt_Gajewski on Twitter. Also, you can listen to this podcast form. You want to go for a nice walk, hike up a mountain, do something like that. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, listen, put on an episode of Betting You, rate and review, hit that like button. All that stuff goes a long way. And of course, and subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Make sure you do that as well. But let's get to it. Arizona and Mississippi State. There's so many teams from either the Pac-12 or just in general linking up in these kind of flying a long way. I'll put it to you like that. And this is another one. Arizona's got to go down to Starkville 9-point spread, 60-point total. What are we doing here?
I like Arizona. I took them plus 10, seeing 9 in some spots.
Yep.
The biggest concern I have with Arizona is Delora is just an absolute roller coaster. 3 turnover-worthy plays, 3 big-time throws against Northern Arizona. My goodness, like Delora, get it together, man. Just cut out. And this was his problem last year. He throws a million interceptions. He's basically Jameis Winston of college football. But offensive line was decent. 5 pressures on 28 dropbacks. Delora was under pressure at points in this game, which could be an issue against Mississippi State. But this Mississippi State defense is rebuilt, and we'll get to their changing offense in a second. But they're a unit that was 122nd in pass rush last year. That's where they have some of their returners. So you're returning bad players, and then you lost like your whole secondary. Now you're facing this like air raid Arizona team with Delora, Ted McMillan, Jacob Cowing. I mean, I think Arizona's going to score points here. And then conversely, Mississippi State broke in their new look offense against Southeastern Louisiana. Will Rogers played fine. He didn't really have to do anything. They ran the ball a ton more, which was to be expected. But now you're facing an Arizona defense, which is rebuilt themselves. And like, I look back, I wasn't sure who they were going to start because they had so many transfers. But this team was awful last year, like one of the worst defenses in the country. You look at what they put on the field this year, there are actually a lot of pretty damn good transfers, like Power 5 transfers. Tyler Manoah's from UCLA, Bill Norton's from Georgia, Taylor Upshaw's from Michigan, Daniel Haimuli's from Washington, and then you have Dylan Wyatt from Cal Poly, but he was originally an Illinois commit, went to Illinois for a year, transferred down to FCS, and now he's back at Power 5. This defense is going to be better. I'm not sure if they're going to improve to like the top 100 or something, but you added a giant group of talented players from Power 5 programs, and some of them being high 4-star, 5-star recruits. They didn't even play Justin Flo that much, the Oregon transfer. He's there as well. So I think the defense can hold up against a completely remade Mississippi State offense. And they're going to score enough where even if Mississippi State has success on offense, I think Arizona is going to play with them and keep it close because of their offensive advantages.
Any interest in splashing around plus 300 for them to pull off the upset?
I think you could sprinkle it.
I kind of like that. I think Arizona is a team that's on the upswing. Big range of outcomes. You mentioned their quarterback. Not saying they're going to win the game. I just don't think that Mississippi State, they're kind of a team that could be exposed here. If you can find, again, shop it, but like plus 300, I'm okay taking a stab there.
Mississippi State does have a good O-line. They should have success running. It's a changing scheme. So, I mean, they return like almost all their players, but they're going from that air raid to that grounded pound scheme. And against Southeastern Louisiana, this doesn't matter. So that's still like a question to me, like how good is this offensive line going to be in the new scheme? I think they'll have success, but it's at least a question worth mentioning.
Yeah, and we just don't know. You can't look, you mentioned, you can't draw anything from a week 1 game like that, whether it's Southeast Louisiana or the Lumberjacks, Northern Arizona. Oklahoma State is another team. Can't really draw much of anything from week 1. And we're going to learn a little more about them right now because they got to go out and take on, I don't think a great team by any stretch, but it's a 3.5-point spread. It's a nighttime game out in the desert against Arizona State. I'm not high on Oklahoma State this year, but do you think they can get through this one and at least make it to week 3?
I like Arizona State at the 3.5. I think that number is key here because you got 2 volatile teams, but 3.5 is a number I do like, and I did play. I'm not buying Oklahoma State either. They use 3 quarterbacks. I don't think any of them are any good. Alan Bowman did not look good. He's probably the best, but the guy hasn't played football for like 4 years after he made a really dumb decision to transfer to Michigan where he wasn't going to play. And like one of their receivers didn't get his waiver. I mean, this team has major problems. You like turn to coaches that are from like D3 ranks or D2 ranks. I don't know. Defense is a problem. They lost Justin Wright, their linebacker. He's not going to play in this game. And I think Arizona State has room for improvement really across the board here. They started Jaden Rashada. I love that. He's a freshman, really highly recruited freshman. He can run. He only took 1 sack. He was pressured on 29% of his dropbacks. That's about average. But with that, he threw 2 big-time throws, 0 turnover-worthy plays, and the offensive line held up decently. A lot of the pressures that were allowed against him came from blitzes, like just sending more guys than you can block, and he took advantage of that. Not to mention This team didn't have Badger in the first half of the game. He was out with a targeting call. He should be back. They should get their tight end, Jalen Connors, back, who got banged up in the game. Once he has a fully healthy receiving core too, I think that's going to help him. And again, I like what their offensive line did. Defense is basically all transfers, but I don't like what this Oklahoma State offense is putting on the field against them. I think there's a lot of untapped potential with Arizona State. I like the 3.5, but honestly, the more I talk about it, this might be a money line worth looking at here too. They enter the home team.
Yeah, let's see. I'll go to the money line real quick. I see 145.
That's not bad.
It could be better in other spots. Yeah, 145, 140 on season. That's not bad. I'm with you. I have not made a play on this game, but I think I'm going to. And it's going to be on the same side as you, just because it's a short of Oklahoma State. I don't really have anything great to say about Arizona State, but I do not like this Oklahoma State team. I think they're really going to struggle this year. Finally catches up to them. They always weasel their way out. I don't think they do that. They really do. I'm not about that with this school. All right, we got 2 games left, and we'll do a quick recap, and we will bounce on out of here. Oh, look at this. The game is right here. Stanford. That was a spot that I got fooled, even though I had some good closing line value. Stanford went out and beat a Hawaii team that I don't know what Vanderbilt was doing. That was just a weird spot. Now they got to take on USC. 29.5, a 70-point total, and I don't know if that's enough. I actually still lean over. Talk to me about this game. Is there any way that Stanford can slow them?
No, I don't think so. But there were a lot of examples of like closing line value doesn't feed your family. Wisconsin, I had them at 24. Florida had them at +8. Neither of them covered. Anyway, Stanford, Hawaii, another example of that. But I actually like under here, 71 points.
Ooh.
Neither of these teams play fast. You're just relying on efficiency. USC was 86th in seconds per play last year. Stanford came in at 81st in week 1. They have a new offense, of course, so we don't have a big sample for them. But ultimately, what it comes down to is I think USC gets stops against Stanford. What I'm really worried about is just USC hitting this number on their own. USC is definitely going to score. I don't really see any way they don't. Only injury on offense they have is they lost Gino Quinones, one of their linemen. He's out for the year. But why I think their defense might play better is they haven't had their linebacking core healthy for 1 game this year. Mason Cobb and Eric Gentry missed their last game. They didn't have Shane Lee in week 0. They're all practicing now. So, I mean, some of the points they've given up, especially, like against the run, San Jose State had some pretty decent success running against them. They did a little better against Nevada. I think having fully healthy linebackers, and like Mason Cobb's a good player here. Gentry's at least a veteran. Shane Lee's been good too. I think that helps them. We saw a big improvement from, like Bear Alexander week 1 to week 2. I think they can get some stops is what I'm trying to say, and why the under makes sense. I took 71. I do think every point matters here. If you're looking at the current number of 70, I would not play it because I think this probably comes up as some public money comes in throughout the week.
Yeah, this is one, like I said, this is good. Maybe we can middle it and push win or something, because I'm on the other side, and it's actually for the exact reason you said. You could play it differently and just bet the over team total on USC. I think USC scores more than 50 points again. And if they do that, I'll say, can Stanford get 14 to 17 to 20 for me? Probably. I just don't see any way that USC doesn't hang 55, 56, 62, something like that. And if they do that, that'll be more than enough. Maybe it's just a team total play the more I think about it. But no one is stopping this team, even though they don't play lightning fast. I don't know what Stanford can do. I have no interest in laying 29.5, though, even though I would be fine. It seems unnecessary. Do you?
I don't like betting teams that name their score.
Yeah, that's a good rule in general. Except if the spread is only 6.5, that just means there's crazy value. And that might be what we're talking about in our final game, because Auburn plays Cal, another like SEC team flying out west. I couldn't have been more wrong about Cal, but I think I was more wrong about North Texas and not about Cal. And I think we're going to find it here. Auburn's coming off, knocking off UMass. My boys, they vested the Dragons. That was the undefeated UMass squad. This is 6.5 point spread. What do you make of Auburn? Can they go out there and get this job done for us?
I like Auburn, and I think they're getting healthier. They helped a lot of guys out in their first game, and players that got banged up in the game, they just took them out immediately. I don't know if you necessarily needed to save them for Cal, but it appears that's what they did. So you do have Jarquez Hunter practicing. I think he's going to play. He's their premier runner. Nick Mardner, a receiver who's expected to contribute, he didn't play. He's practicing. Jalen McLeod, linebacker, practicing again. Nehemiah Pritchett, one of their corners, he's practicing. That's all positive for Auburn. And then on the other side, Sam Jackson got hurt. He's their starter. You actually saw Ben Finley play decently in relief. We'll talk about him in a second. But they lost their center, Matthew Cindric. I don't think that's going to be a positive. Auburn's a team I really like overall. I'm worried that it might take some time for them to gel. They have a million transfers. They did use 2 quarterbacks, which I don't like, but Ashford actually came in and played really well. You got good play out of Peyton Thorne. He didn't do anything poorly. And then for Cal, I still have a bunch of concerns with this team, especially at the quarterback position. Without Jackson, they basically blasted a North Texas secondary, which was decent last year, but Ben Finley still had 1 turnover-worthy play, 0 big-time throws. He was under pressure a lot, a 37% pressure rate. I think that offensive line is going to be a problem for them at times this year, especially without their center, Cindric. They didn't add a ton, and they were pretty bad last year. So against a better team like Auburn, I do think this shows up. Jaden Ott's the guy you really have to stop. If you can stop Jaden Ott for Cal, you can stop this team and beat them. I don't have any faith in this this Cal defense. We talked about them at length in the preview show and last week as well. Basically didn't add anybody. And I don't know if even facing a one-dimensional Auburn offense on the other side is going to be a concern here. I still like Auburn. Think you're getting an overreaction to Cal beating up on a North Texas team, which might be a little worse than we thought.
Agree. Inside 7. I'm going to not overreact to 1 week. Maybe Cal's better than we thought. I don't love when teams have to hit the road in weird spots like this, but talent-wise, Auburn should just get it done. The thing I like, you mentioned Ashford. Their quarterbacks, they do in some ways complement each other a little bit, and I think that can be useful. I don't love seeing 2 out there, but I still think that Auburn just has more options, more backup plans. Don't think Cal will have even remotely the same success in terms of run. They could run whatever they wanted against that North Texas defense. They were running through them with ease. That is not going to happen against this Auburn team.
I think the Auburn offensive line is good here too. So I did some deep digging because UMass, they did a couple things. They didn't end up getting it done, but Auburn had a 39% pressure rate. And I was like, okay, this is Don Brown's defense on the other side. How much of this did the offensive line allow? How much of it was Don Brown being a madman blitzing every single play? The offensive line didn't allow a single pressure. Don Brown just sending an absurd amount of blitzes to still generate pressure on 39% of dropbacks, but clearly it didn't work for them. They did not have enough guys in coverage, but my goodness, that was pretty funny. That's kind of what I thought might happen, but man, no pressures allowed by the O-line, all of them coming from blitzes.
Yeah, what can I say? That's what we do at UMass, but tough scenes. Again, Auburn, -6.5, put it on the board. All right. We have gone through a ton of games. Again, the timestamps are below, but we're going to do a quick recap here. And I do want to say, as we get to our kind of best bets here on the way out, just one more quick shout out for Caesars. If you're not over there, take advantage of this, new users. That link is below. Take 5 minutes, bet your $50 and get $250 in bonus bets. No reason not to. 21 plus, gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. But really, really good stuff there. Now, you got a couple bets to make. The board, we went through a bunch. What are your priorities for the week for the people as we put a bow on week 2?
Yes, I told you everything I played. I would play it all again. But if I had to rank like a top 3, I would do Colorado -3. I know it's chalk, but think they're the better team overall. Ole Miss -7. And I'll give you 4. Arizona State +3.5. I'll close it out with SMU +16, 15.5, whatever you can find. You should be something bouncing around in there. And then if you want the content like Sam Houston State, Rutgers, the absolute greasy games, we'll be doing a VOD later in the week covering those. So check that out if you want to get real deep.
Oh yeah, all about that because I got a couple of those. I'm gonna throw Iowa into the mix. I think that Iowa is they got issues, but Iowa State's got double issues. And I really think that Iowa will handle them. A lot of road teams this week. It's a little suspect when you do that, but sometimes that's just the board. And I'm actually going to give you one more on the way out that we talked about. I know it feels trappy, UCF is the better team, and Boise State has got some issues. I'm going to lay those points with UCF. I know you like them as well. So a nice spread of options here while you're digging in to your week 2. And again, this is just the Betting You deep dive. We're going to have VODs and parlay videos and everything else that you need here at Odd Chopper. That's why we hope that you like and subscribe and listen wherever you may be, whether it's podcast or here on YouTube. We appreciate each and every one of you. We're going to get on out of here. For me, for Matt, and for all of us at Odd Chopper, thanks again for listening. Much appreciated. Good luck. Enjoy all the week 2 games. Stop by next week for another breakdown of week 3 college football.